fans, welcome to this week's Nerd Words. We just finished several hours ago watching Spider-Man, The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and kind of give you our thoughts and such on the film. And John's going to give some historical perspective of some of these characters.
Well, I enjoyed the film pretty well. It's probably, to me, close to the first one that Raimi made. Not quite as good as the original Spider-Man 2, which, as I've said before, is my favorite superhero movie of all time. But this one was a solid movie. It's on par, to me, with Captain America 2 for superhero movies this year. Some people like to complain about it, apparently, that maybe have not saw it yet. It's not overrun by villains like Spider-Man 3 was.
One of the things I liked about it, I'm not necessarily a fan of Ultimate Electro. I like Max Dillon in the suit. But Jamie Foxx did a heck of a job as Electro. I kind of liked. He's a little bit more powerful.
This Electro is vastly different from the regular comics Electro. I'm not going to give away any spoilers, but you'll see if you know how the regular Electro works and how this one works.
This was actually the Ultimate Spider-Man version of Electro.
Not all the Ultimate stuff. He's mainly the focus villain-wise, though, and the Rhino is in the movie. I'm not going to give any spoilers of where he comes. And Green Goblin's in the movie. Very little participation from the Green Goblin and Rhino in the film, especially Rhino. So I say it's not overrun by villains. There's not any, it's not competing villains on the screen crowding things up like, in my opinion, The Dark Knight Rises. The Dark Knight did with adding Two-Face in, or back to the original Batman movies that, by the time they had Mr. Freeze and
Poison Ivy and
Bane, everybody in it. They're approaching these movies well. It was something of a setup movie for the future of the films, but that's to be expected.
Well, a lot of comic books, you'll have a setup for just the big epic story arc. So,
well, it's very similar to the comics, and there's a lot of Peter Parker in it. Some people apparently don't like that very much. Not sure why. Peter is. That's what Spider-Man is. The Spider-Man comics, if you've read many of them, you know that it's about Peter Parker and how he deals with being Spider-Man. It's not about Spider-Man and how he deals with being Peter Parker. Much like Superman he's Superman and Clark Kent is his alternate identity. This is Peter Parker and Spider-Man is his alternate identity. It's a difference in the way you look at things and the way Marvel does things.
And I really think Andrew Garfield gets the banter of Spider-Man down pretty good.
Yeah, there's a lot of good banners.
The Stan Lee cameo is excellent as always.
A big event happens in it that's comes straight out of the Spider-Man comics. Not much to complain about at all in it, in my opinion. And I think anybody who enjoys superhero films should enjoy it. And if you enjoy Spider-Man, you should really enjoy it as well.
Now, there is an X-Men scene in the mid-credits.
Yeah, that's, we've discussed before, part of a deal. They claim part of a deal they worked out because Sony hired away a director from
Fox.
And that was a little bit of a payback for them. But I still think they'll maybe eventually try to blend the two universes to compete with Disney and Warner Brothers. Because, face it, I love Spider-Man. He's a great, great character. But the trend for superhero movies right now is to try to build a universe. With Spider-Man, you really have him and a bunch of villains. Black Cat is a part-time villain and a part-time hero, I guess. She was introduced in the film, Felicia Hardy, not as a Black Cat, but just as Felicia Hardy. Not, it doesn't distract at all from the story in any way, her introduction. Venom apparently becomes a hero at some point in the comics.
And he's actually not even been hinted about in the first two movies, even though we know from what our director Chris Burton has come up with through his various sources that there is going to be a Venom film.
But they're having to go the strange route of building a universe around villains with the Sinister Six film as well.
Now, as it would have, Spider-Man does have some great villains to work with.
He's got the best rogues gallery there is in comics. You were hinted at villains in the film. If you look, when they're in Oscorp, you see
And this is in the trailer, this is no spoiler.
you see Dr. Octopus's tentacles. You see the Vulture's wings.
See the Rhino suit.
And of course, you see the Rhino suit in it.
Well, it's a little bit different take on Rhino than the guy who gets glued into his suit in the original books that Spider-Man just beats on constantly.
Yeah.
And I love Paul Giamatti, and I think he's going to be a fun Rhino.
Yeah, I say it's set up for a good third installment, and then after the third installment, before the fourth, apparently that's when you're going to see the Sinister Six and Venom films possibly. And I don't know if Spider-Man will be in them or not. None of that's been announced yet. I mean, this is all speculation on how it's going to work out. But that they want to build the universe. I think though that you may see them competing in the future. And Spider-Man is great friends with Johnny Storm. They're both teenage heroes in the same time frame.
Johnny Storm bought him the Spider-Mobile.
Johnny Storm, they teamed up in Strange Tales, the early Strange Tales, once it switched over from a horror format. And before Doctor Strange really was even a featured character in Strange Tales. It was Johnny Storm and the Human Torch and Peter Parker and Spider-Man teamed up together into the lot.
And since Marvel has a lot of your urban heroes, your Daredevil, Iron Fist, Power Man, and Doctor Strange all back in the fold, that really only leaves that avenue with Spider-Man.
I think there's a good shot that you will see a team up eventually in the future. Sony, Spider-Man's the more popular character. Fox, Fantastic Four, it's been on shaky footing for so long.
In fact, it would only help Fox.
If they can team up the Fantastic Four and Spider-Man, I think you could get some great story work out of that. And
One of the earliest
universes.
Spider-Man, or one of the earliest team-ups in Marvel's Spider-Man and Fantastic
Amazing
Four.
Spider-Man #1, the Fantastic Four guest star. Spider-Man went to Reed Richards to try to join the Fantastic Four. And when he found out the Fantastic Four didn't actually pay money, he quit.
He's a starving college or high school
He was
kid
in
at the
high
time.
school and, he may needed a heart medication. But, it would make sense for them to do that. I don't know if they will or not. I don't know. Maybe just on the surface of it, that is completely legitimate, and we're just doing a favor. It makes no sense to me to do a favor for your competitor, and it would make sense for me to them to team up against Disney and against DC, Warner Brothers, because the more properties you can get, the bigger the universe you can build. And the way apparently it looks like with Avengers and things like that, the more money you can make doing that.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, I just saw a thing where the Avengers, or the Disney Marvel films have made, I believe, $7 or $8 billion now, and that's just a huge, huge lick.
Now, I believe Spider-Man won the weekend box office with $92 million. So, that's not a bad haul. Now, just imagine if you have a Spider-Man Fantastic Four X-Men joint.
See, I could see them keeping the X separated, or there could be a Spider-Man Wolverine movie at some point, but I could see definitely a Spider-Man Human Torch team up to help the Fantastic Four along, because the Fantastic Four
Needs it more than the X-Men
needs some
does.
help in its reboot. That second Fantastic Four movie that's how quickly a franchise can nearly be killed by a bad film. I mean, Spider-Man 3 affected the Spider-Man franchise even right now, because before that, Spider-Man was the big Marvel hero, money making at the box office. His first 3 films set box office records for opening weekends. Spider-Man, the original Spider-Man, was the first film to ever open over $100 million. And I believe Spider-Man 3 opened something like $165 million at the time it opened. And it's huge, huge business, but it was a bad film, so it hurt the franchise. And the first film of the Andrew Garfield era made a lot of money, but it didn't make as much as those original 3 did. And this one's going to make a lot of money, but it's not going to make as much as those original 3. That would make sense, like I say, to help each other out in that regard. Disney has a vast portable universe. I was interested, and this is an Easter egg, I guess you could say, for Spider-Man. They mentioned the Vault in it.
They did, which is one of Marvel's 4 super prisons.
Marvel, I want to say, I'm not 100% sure. I want to say the Vault probably debuted in Avengers. It seems like it did, but I'm not 100%
It debuted
sure.
in Avengers Annual. I'm almost positive. I actually have the first appearance of it.
it's a big universal concept within Marvel. Is the vault is their prison for really super powered beings. Like say, if you catch the Rhino, or the Rhino in his comic form anyway, that is actually extremely
Super
strong and doesn't have a suit, or just any of the
Electro,
any of the
Who they sent there.
super powered villains,
Graviton.
Graviton, whomever, that's where they go. They go to the vault, and I say it's a big universal concept in Marvel. And I've not heard it mentioned in any Avengers movies. Maybe the vault debuted in Spider-Man, and I just can't remember the issue that it did.
Also, here's the way, Marvel, currently they have 4 super prisons. The Vault was the original one. But lately they've had one they call it the Big House. And it's really the opposite of that. Hank Pym shrinks villains down and sticks them in a tiny prison. And they're tiny, so if they get out, there's not much they can do with that. Pym particles. And I have a feeling if they do that with the Avengers, since we get an Ant-Man movie, I imagine the Big House might be the super prison they use.
That's possible. The other thing I'm curious about, and we don't have much time to discuss it more on this episode, is exactly who that Spider-Man does own, who Sony owns from the Spider-Man universe.
And actually, that will be the topic for another, possibly in the next episode of Nerd Words. Since we are running out of time, we're going to wrap this one up, and we'll see you next time, fans.